Well, the issues around the Cardinal Abuja train bombing is still on the table, but there are those who contend with the fact that we need resources, all the resources we can get to deal with all of the issues confronting us as a nation. And one of those ways is tax revenue. And this morning we have with us Taiwo Oyedele, Africa Tax Leader, PwC, who joins us virtually from Lagos, to take on some of the issues around raising taxes with that, beg your pardon, raising revenue without raising taxes. Good morning, Mr. Oyedele. How is that going to happen?
Good morning. Good morning. I think that needs to happen and is the right way to do. I was actually very happy that the president emphasized that point. So we need more tax revenue. We are not saying we should introduce new taxes. We're not saying we should increase the rate of existing taxes. The tax revenue we need is feeding within inefficiency within the tax system. Is feeding within leakages within the tax system, is feeding within political patronage within the tax system, and the lack of coordination. So actually, Nigerians pay a lot of taxes, individuals, households, small businesses, large businesses, but government collects so little. So which means something happens in between what the people pay and what government collects. And those are the issues we really need to address, so we can generate a lot more in tax revenue without raising rates or introducing new taxes.
Well, Mr. Oyedele, forgive me, maybe it's my pessimism playing out, but what's the difference between taxes, levies, duties, and all those other names that come with taxes?
Yeah, no, this is an excellent question, Ayo. And this question is very fundamental because many of our politicians and political leaders get this mixed up. So the reality is, when you say something is a tax, when you say it's a levy, it really doesn't matter. So long as it's imposed by law and it is mandatory and there's no direct benefits to the taxpayer. So if you're hungry now and you go to a restaurant and you buy a meal and it's 1,000 naira, you get the direct benefit of 1,000 naira. If you decide to eat more or have a drink, you spend more and you get the direct benefit. When it comes to taxes, the amount you pay, so if you pay 10 million naira in personal income tax to Lagos State, and if that food driver pays only 1,000, you can't tell them to give you more space when you are driving, right? So any amount you have to pay that is required by law and it is mandatory without any direct benefit is a tax. It doesn't matter the name you call it. The only difference is when you have to pay for services. So like government saying you have to pay for your waste to be collected, you have to pay for your water to be sanitized or certified safe for consumption if you are producing, consumables like food. Those are different. Other than that, every other thing that you pay to government is a tax. And we also need to remind ourselves that in Nigeria, we also have other forms of taxes. I usually have to say that there are three categories broadly. We have the formal taxes. That's one that the law says we should pay to government. You have the informal taxes. These are the ones you pay to non-state actors like the Agros, Lagos. And then you have the implicit taxes. Implicit taxes are those, things you have to take care of yourself, which normally the state or the government, I should say, should be taking care of, like security, your road. Many of us who live in estates can relate to exactly what I'm saying.
Just one, a number of other things to raise, but this particular one comes to mind right now, Mr. Oyedele. And that's the fact that on the one hand, the federal government says only FIRS collects taxes. And you say there is no difference within taxes, levies, duties, and all of that. But then there are those who have to deal with those other agencies of government, immigration service, customs, you name it. So there's that. Then there are those you call overlapping taxes, multiple taxes, taxes collected by states and also perhaps collected by the federal government. So perhaps there is a need for some form of harmonization of all of these activities, both at the federal and state levels. Do you see any way in which that lack of harmonization or overlapping functions impede on the interest of people to volunteer to pay taxes?
Yes, absolutely. And this was the theme of the National Tax Dialogue hosted by Mr. President a couple of days ago. So there's no harmony. And harmony, the simple definition in the dictionary is how do you arrange things to make them pleasing, right? So it's not pleasing to pay tax in Nigeria because on one hand, we have not, as a country, harmonized what taxes we need to pay. So officially, there are about 55 different taxes collectible by federal, state, and local governments. Unofficially, there are more than 200 taxes, right? And, fortunately, about 98% of the taxes collected across the country come from less than 10 taxes. So we need to harmonize the taxes we collect. There shouldn't be so many of them. And I've advocated many times that we need to amend the Constitution to put a limit to the number of taxes that can be imposed by different levels of government. Number two, we need to harmonize who collects the tax. You mentioned customs, there's FRS, we have the State Internal Revenue Services, we have all manners of agency, from even the Upstream Regulatory Commission is collecting royalty. Now, the question is, even if you look at West Africa, don't even go too far. Of all the 13 countries in West Africa, it's only Nigeria that has this kind of disjointed way of collecting taxes. The Ghana Revenue Authority warehouses both the Revenue Authority and Customs, HMRC, South African Revenue Service, Kenya Revenue Authority, and the list goes on and on. It's even worse in Nigeria as we speak now. There's a bill at the National Assembly trying to establish a tax crimes commission. And still it's not enough that we have the EFCC, you have RAMFA, you have all manners of agencies. So the more that you duplicate the function of collection of taxes, given that tax is a specialist area, it requires a lot of training. You have people who don't have any clues. In fact, we've seen National Assembly doing tax audit. We've seen the FCC doing tax audits. Now, this way we duplicate tax collection is a big problem to the system. One, it raises the cost of collection. Two, it creates complications in terms of cost of compliance for taxpayers and complicates the ease of doing business. And lastly, is we need to harmonize how we collect, okay? What we collect, who collects, and how we collect it. And the how we collect it today is mostly about technology. Do we have coordination in terms of exchange of data? Do we have exchange of information? Do we collaborate, state and federal and other countries around the world? So it's a whole lot, but we really need to harmonize. In the National Tax Policy, approved in 2017, it says we have only one revenue agency per level of government. In other words, at the federal government level, it should be only the FRS. I recently visited Rwanda and had some engagement with Rwanda revenue authorities. In fact, for them, if you want to pay for international passports, vehicle license, district levies, everything is paid through the revenue authority, one platform. And the intelligence they are getting from that coordination has helped them increase their revenue by more than 300%, even for districts that they have been collecting taxes for. We need to do the same thing in Nigeria.
Okay, so Mr. Oyedele, I understand why this is a very important discussion, because we're looking at a budget of 17 trillion naira for 2022, and we definitely need to fund that budget. Yes, there's a borrowings angle to it, but I mean, there's so much we can also do with the non-oil and oil taxes and all of that. But I'm also curious, the kinds of solutions that were discussed at that dialogue essentially was meant to be, brainstorming to move forward. So how can we indeed not raise taxes, but raise the taxes, as it were, okay? Not increase the taxes, but raise or increase what we get from the taxes. Is it by, and I'm asking what kind of solutions were proffered that day, because it's important to look at the implementation. Is it by converting those implicit and informal taxes to formal taxes? Is it by what, widening the tax net? How will that happen? I'm quite curious, actually. What solutions were proffered?
Yeah, it's a combination, kind of this. So it's a combination of almost everything you have said. Maybe in the order of priority is the primary focus in terms of recommendation at that dialogue section was harmonization. So harmonization, can we even just start by merging the Nigerian Customs Service and the FRS and stop every agency of federal government from collecting revenue and let the revenue authority do that for them? So imagine today that I import a product, right? So my motivation as an ordinary citizen generally, and I'm not saying I will do this because I'm a Nigerian who wants to do the right thing, would be to under-declare the value of the cost so that I can reduce my import duties, right? So I'll do that. I can do it successfully. People do it successfully 9 out of 10 times. And then when I need to file, because now what I imported is a cost to me for doing my business. When I file my company's income tax returns with the FRS, my motivation now is different. I want to overstate the cost so that my profit can be low and my company income tax can be less. So I can easily declare goods at 10 million naira for customs to pay duties and declare it at 100 million naira to the FRS to pay tax, and they will not know. Actually, they don't know in Nigeria. So these are some of the issues when you have coordination. So that is a significant low-hanging fruit for Nigeria. And this is not only for federal, it cuts across even state and local government. The second one is how can you use technology to also, again, harmonize information. So if Kayode has a property in Lagos and you have in Abuja and you're collecting rental income and you work for China's TV and you collect salaries, what tends to happen today is we do PAYE on your salary and we pay to government, and that seems to be all. They do not have the connected intelligence to say that actually Kayode also earns rental income, and rental income is liable to tax and it hasn't been declared. And as a matter of fact, we need to start with our leaders. So go to any level of government, whether it's governor, whether it's the presidency, whether it's the National Assembly. We've had reports of the Auditor General actually accusing this National Assembly and the presidency at the highest level for not paying taxes, not remitting the PAYE they have deducted. So there's a lot of revenue we can generate from using intelligence and technology and data in a coordinated manner to find who has the ability to pay so that they can pay. And we can stop taxing poverty. We are taxing poverty in Nigeria. So if you calculate the poverty level is somewhere around $1.90, right? Average size of a family in Nigeria is 6. People who are likely to be working will be 2. That's the mom and the dad if they are lucky. The amount you need to live just at the poverty line is over 100,000 for that family. Divided by 2, you're looking at about 50, 60,000 per person. But we're taxing people who earn even 30,000 naira and 1 naira above, right? So that is not right, because those who have the means and the ability to pay have succeeded in not paying, sometimes by outright evasion, and sometimes by playing the games of influencing government in terms of what taxes they want to pay.
Well, just one more thing before I take this to Abuja. First, I'm glad you shifted the attention away from Kayode and moved to the hypothetical case, because I'm a taxpayer and a diligent one at that. But I was looking at the figures from FAC allocation from last month, February, and it showed that the contribution of VAT was 173 billion or thereabouts, compared to 191 billion from the previous month, January. So it looks like the ability to pay, or the purchasing power, or the consumption pattern of people has actually dropped as well. And we're talking about trying to get more taxes, but are we also factoring the reality of people? For example, if VAT contribution has dropped from 191 billion to 173 billion, and you know what the purchasing power is. So can we really have those conversations together?
Yeah, no, I think, one thing we don't do well in Nigeria is how we use data, right? So you will know that in December, there's always a lot of activities, a lot of purchases. Even poor people would have saved for the whole year just to have a nice meal, right? So spending is very high in December. So value-added tax is paid the following month. So the VAT that was remitted in January, which was that very high amount, was based on activities in December. Now, we all know that January is always a long month, right? People don't have a lot of money left to spend. So we should normally expect, and data will show us this, if the governors and the government have just taken the time to look at the data. So the expectation is that the amount of VAT collected in February will always be less than the amount collected in January. But it doesn't take away the point we're trying to make, which is the fact that if the purchasing power of the people is dwindling and people are losing employment and people who have employment are barely surviving, then you have to acknowledge the fact that revenue from VAT cannot continue to go up unless you find people who have the ability to pay and haven't been paying before. Because when people are really poor, their attention will shift to survival, which is they just want to have a meal, they want to have a roof over their head if they're lucky, and then maybe water to drink. And those basic consumptions are usually VAT exempted, which means you can't get VAT from them. And so this is where the issue is. We really have to also look at it that the way to generate revenue is to make prosperity common for individuals, for businesses, whether they are large or small. The more prosperous businesses are, or the more profitable, if I put it in a simpler way, they are, and the more income that individuals earn and households, the more their ability to pay taxes. Elon Musk told us last year on Twitter that he was going to pay close to $11 billion in personal income tax to the US authorities. Now, that amount alone is more than the personal income tax collected in Nigeria over the past 4 years across the country. So again, we have to go back to how do we ensure that it's easy to do business, the economy grows in an inclusive manner so that people have the ability and the means to pay their taxes.
When you started the conversation, you talked about, you made the differentiation between taxes, levies, and all manner of monies that people pay. I just want to ask you where tenement rate falls, because you're talking about people evading tax from rental income.
Yes, so tenement rate is a tax because in many countries, like in Canada, any taxes to do with property is designed to address the infrastructural need of that locality. And such that when a community or a local area has fully developed, in fact, the property tax rates come down because now they need less money just to do maintenance. Whereas a developing area requires more to put the infrastructure in place. Nobody even talks about that in Nigeria. But anyway, tenement rate is a tax. And states like Lagos State have harmonized that with ground rents and all manner of property taxes, and they call it land use charge. Now, when you pay this, I have to say I live in Lagos, I pay my land use charge, but I really can't see the impact of the taxes that I pay. Unfortunately, it's still a tax. We have to pay it because two wrongs don't make it right. But government also has to balance that equation within the social contract. That when I do pay my taxes, government will spend it to take care of me. That is the essence of the social contract. And this
I'm
really
asking that because you talked about
yes.
Also paying taxes on rental income. So if you pay tenement rates, is anyone still expected to pay any tax on rental income?
Yes, of course you should. Because again, you may have to pay tenement rates when you don't even have a tenant. Right? Whereas rental income in itself presupposes that you most likely have a property where you reside, and then you have an extra space or another property that you are letting out. By the design of the tax system anywhere in the world, when you earn rental income, chances are that you are not the poorest in society. And part of fairness and equity and progressive taxation is that the more you earn, the more you should contribute to the treasury. So you normally find many countries would again tax your rental income notwithstanding that you paid land use charge, settlement rate, and the likes.
Let me quickly ask you this, because I hear we're winding up now. From all that you have said, in terms of how the president has suggested that we collect more revenue without increasing tax, there is a body of knowledge there. You've talked about how there are leakages from the collection point. There's always that historical reference to the problem with tax collectors. But I'm wondering, what exactly has been the bane, the problem, between knowledge, what we know, and there are many tax experts like yourself, perhaps also advising government. What has been the problem between knowledge and implementation?
This is a very good question, Malpe. So the problem is, I don't think the problem is knowledge, or maybe you want to say that the people who are making the decisions don't have the knowledge, and those who have the knowledge are not the one making the decisions. And when you volunteer this information and your expertise, sometimes you have to say something 1,000,001 times before they hear it only once. So even though the president has said rightly that we should generate more revenue without raising taxes, but I can tell you just the last Finance Act introduced now taxes on educational institutions. We didn't used to have that before. It increased education tax rate from 2% to 2.5%. It says we must pay a police levy to fund the police. It says we must pay a new levy for engineering and science. We've just done the direct opposite of what we're saying we should stop doing. So one, there is sometimes knowledge gap between who knows and who are the one implementing the policies or introducing them, and also maybe even just the will to do the right thing, because I do see a lot of vested interest within the system, where the more you create these taxes and new agencies, the more some people benefit. And you can see the example of Kaduna State, for example. They just harmonized their taxes, their tax laws without introducing new taxes, and they've succeeded in increasing their revenue from taxes by 300% in 5 years. So this is possible on a larger scale across Nigeria and at the center, if we are really willing to do it.
By that broached another, vexed topic of expanding the tax bracket. We don't have more time to take that on now. We have to thank you very much this morning, Taiwo Oyedele, Africa Tax Leader, PwC, especially since you've prophesied that I'm going to pay 10 million naira as tax, not front tax. I received that prophecy. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, more issues after this break. Don't go away.